Working with the Plymouth Environmental Action Team to explore ways to increase composting education and utilization in Plymouth. So to help facilitate this discussion, I did invite Laura Grunwald-Rentmeester, who's a conservation specialist with Sheboygan County. So she's going to do a presentation tonight, answer questions. She's an expert in this subject matter, so learn about the education of composting and the challenges that accompany it. Laura, please.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Like you said, my name is Laura Grunwald-Rentmeester. I work at the Conservation Department in Sheboygan. A little bit about me. I hate using the phrase expert sometimes, but I have been doing composting conversations for 22 years. I went through a training, it was a 16-week training on master composting and recycling. So since then, I've been teaching locally, a lot through Plymouth Community Ed. I teach classes that way. I've also done it on a consulting basis, working, for example, like with Kohler Company, things like that, figuring out what are the regulations associated with composting, just all around going to people's houses, giving them tips. So kind of like the whole spectrum, all things composting. So, and I will say this is my absolute shortest ever compost, like intro to composting I've ever given. So usually it's like an hour and we get really deep into it. So I'm going to like sum it up in the shortest amount. Kind of the intro to composting, I like this little acronym SMART. If you can spell SMART, you can compost. So to be effective and efficient with composting, you need to think about the size, the moisture, aeration, and the ratio to turn your food scraps into compost. So we're going to do a very quick intro of each of those. So our S for SMART stands for size, and that means the size of your pile. So it's really not very effective if your pile is smaller than 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. Your pile can be much bigger, it really is too small if it's smaller than 3 by 3 by 3. And the size of the stuff that you're putting into it, if you want it to turn over quickly, there is, like they say, the rule of thumb, or just smaller than your thumb or smaller than 2 inches. So things will decompose faster if they are smaller. And then our M stands for moisture, which is the overall moisture of the pile should feel like a wrung out sponge. So you don't want it too wet, otherwise it could get stinky and musty, and you also don't want it too dry because it won't decompose as quickly. So the M is our moisture. Okay, A stands for aerate. So this is where we are turning our pile, mixing our things, and what we're doing is we're actually adding more oxygen into these tiny little microorganisms that are already on our banana peels and on our corn cobs or things like that that we're putting into our pile. So there's tiny little microbes already on it, and when we give them more oxygen, then they are like the little Energizer buddies. So that's when they start going again, and the actual heat from a compost pile comes from that activity, not from the sun or something like that. The more you turn your pile, the more oxygenated your pile is, actually the quicker the process is. And then ratio, this is the ratio of the stuff that we're adding to our pile. So you might hear like carbons and nitrogen and greens and browns and wet and dry. So basically a perfect combination of those things layered into your piles or mixed together is when you're going to be a smart composter. If you've got it all in balance, then you will be able to compost quickly. And T is turn. So we are turning, and I'm sorry if that's a little small for some of you, but we're turning leftover food scraps that is not meat or dairy products related and things from your yard into what we can use as a soil amendment. So the finished product is not soil, it's what we add to soil to make things grow better. And you can kind of see the examples of greens and browns, or nitrogen and carbon, or that wet and dry. So like if you think of a farm, You have manure and bedding, and that is your perfect combination of wet and dry carbon, and like food scraps and shredded paper, for example, would be a perfect example of that ratio that we're working for. So some of the myths, I kind of talked about, so that's my very fast intro to composting. So you're all masters now too, right? There's a lot to it, but this is in a nutshell. If you follow those basic fundamentals, you will be composting effectively. So one of the myths that comes with composting is that the heat comes from, like, we need a black bin, or it has to be directly in the sun, or you have to put black plastic over it. You do not need to do any of those things. The heat and the speed comes from that oxygen going to those microorganisms. And then some other things, compost bins can smell. Well, they can, again, if it's not balanced correctly. If we are too wet, or if we have 90% of it is banana peels and 10% is grass clippings, that's way out of that ratio balance. So you're going to get some smells that way. And then sometimes, again, if you are out of balance, you could attract pests. So just kind of something that, there are sometimes even like municipalities that say, oh, compost bins have to be covered because they are worried about rodents. And I don't even know if there is one in the city of Plymouth. I know in Milwaukee that was one. But it's more about, are you composting correctly to make sure. So there's that. So benefits to composting, like why are we even here? Why are we even talking about it, right? So some of the really cool things for me is it would have ended up in the trash. And 30% of what most Americans have in their trash could have been composted. So like just even looking at this room and thinking about what we would be producing that could be going somewhere else, that we don't have to put in a garbage truck, and we don't have to worry about landfills, and we don't have to think about the planning that comes out of something like that. And then find a positive purpose for what was destined to be unchanged forever in landfills. So it will not decompose in a landfill. It doesn't have that extra oxygen coming at it. The banana peel might start decomposing on its way to the landfill, but it will just sit in the landfill like that without that new oxygen. So those are, I tried to make the benefits fit us, for tonight's purposes, but there's lots of wonderful things. You're producing an all-natural soil amendment. So, to be successful at any scale of composting, and this could be a single family or as big as a municipality, you kind of have to have somebody who takes the lead. You need a cheerleader. You need somebody who has the information, has the ideas, and you need to have that be like an assigned position, like job description, not just so-and-so is going to do it on Wednesday after work, but then their kid has soccer, right? So you have to have it set in place that there is someone who's in charge. And then with that, you have to have trusted helpers, right? In case so-and-so's schedule changes all of a sudden. So you have to have it set in place where there is someone who can follow through with everything and stand in as a leader if need be, and then, like I said, officially assigned to help. So again, it could be teaching the kids how to compost, or we are teaching facility folks how to compost, or it's a service you rent out. With that, I feel like there has to be very well established educational materials. If someone like a city would want to start this, there has to be signage. There should be classes, there should be reminders, and any way anyone wants their media. If it's social media, or any way they want their information, it's in a newspaper. If people are reading newspapers, hey, we're thinking about doing a compost program. There could be surveys given out, but basically there should be well-established, consistent educational materials. And it should be simple and a nice combination of pictures and words. So in the past, I didn't say this in the slide earlier, but before COVID, I actually was an employee of the school district, and I had almost all of the schools composting here in our area. And this was kids composting their leftovers at lunch. So I got kids to do it with a combination, even the kids that can't read yet, a combination of words and pictures, and it worked. So well-established educational materials. And then the last one is, again, well-established infrastructure. So you have to set up a system and spend more time planning than it takes to implement, in my opinion. So more time planning about how can we make it easy on the folks who are going to manage it? How are we going to make it easy for anyone who's going to drop off material? How can we make everything easy and the least amount of steps and the least cost, and just kind of put a lot of thought to the planning process so that you engineer out any issues from the get-go. My thought. So like I said, I can apply this to my single family at home, like how do I make sure the kids are putting the right stuff in, you know? But you can apply all these thoughts to the bigger picture also. So let's think about Plymouth. So right now in Plymouth, if people are composting, it's mostly like a single family, right? I have been teaching composting classes for 13 years now here in Plymouth, and my one regret is that I didn't keep track of the students. I think that would have been really cool to say, oh, I now have 200 Plymouth residents, you know, maybe some of my students are here. Yeah, right? So I just saying, there are a lot of people who have taken composting classes here in Plymouth, but the majority of composting right now is happening at the residential level. And all public schools in Plymouth have an on-site compost bin. So that was, some of them were there before me, but others I helped I helped get them established when I was in that position. And right now, the city's collected yard waste goes through Busy Bee Compost. So that's a facility just north of Plymouth. It's Marcus Gamoki is the owner, and I don't really know all the terms, but all the street sweeping from the pickups, right, Tim?
Correct.
Is that what it is?
Yard waste drop-offs.
Yard waste. Okay, so drop off only to the location.
And leaves.
And leaves, yep.
And leaves, okay, yep, so they're already set up to do that. I do know that Busy Bee does not, at this point, collect people's food scraps. So it's just like what we talked about. And then there is another small service there, her name is Gretchen, and it's called Waste Not. So she's a residential service that you can hire, and basically she gives you a 5-gallon bucket with a lid on top, and you pay like $5 a week. It's something very minimal, and she will pick up said bucket and then give you an empty one. So that's it. Like you have your watermelon party and you put it all in there, and then she takes it. And then she composts it locally. So that is, to my knowledge, that is what is available right now to folks in the city of Plymouth. So this is pretty much my last slide, but I did want to give some examples of bigger picture projects that are happening right here in Wisconsin. Some of these are actual business, and others like City of La Crosse, for example. They have a drop-off location, and you take your food scraps to their city location only in the summer months, and they don't accept it in the winter months, but they compost right there on the property. They do also have, through Harders, they have, Harders offers a service where they pick up food scraps curbside in La Crosse. Another one, South Madison Farmers Market, they have a drop-off location right there at the farmers market. So if you are going to the farmers market, you can take your 5-gallon bucket to them, and then someone from there takes it to Fitchburg and composts it there on that property. But it's set up through actual South of Madison. So it's kind of a unique situation. UW Stevens Point has a really unique thing going on too. They have campus collection bins like throughout all of the campus, and they purchased a digester. So they compost all their things that the university produces, including like things the students have in their rooms, that gets digested there at the university. So that's kind of a unique situation, and I believe some of that was grant funded, their digester. And of course, then the students help do the work and learn from the process. And then there's another one in Milwaukee. The last one is a company called Compost Crusaders. They do a curbside pickup, so there's like roll carts, and it's mostly restaurants and some residences, but it's an actual truck that comes through, just like a garbage or recycling truck. And they also have a few free drop-off locations in their area. So all of that is taken to a place in Caledonia where it's composted at an actual composting facility. So those are just some examples of what's happening currently, and I tried to kind of give, municipality and services that you could do. So now we can, anybody else can talk if they want to, or I gave you like this shortest version of composting ever, so it's kind of a tough one to do.
Laura,
Yes.
I attended one of your classes.
Okay. Thank you, by the way.
And he's never been the same.
He's one of
My wife's never been the same. Can you talk about worm farms? Because I had some worm bins.
Yeah.
And so you can take your kitchen waste and put it in containers, and you get worm compost and juice, which is very, very high in nutrients.
Correct.
And actually it's marketable too.
It is. So he is talking about the phrase vermicomposting, which is literally just composting with worms in a corralled place. So I was kind of mentioning more about backyard composting, and you can do vermicomposting on a very large scale also. And it is using worms, especially red wigglers, because they are the absolute most effective and efficient. They are non-natives to Wisconsin, so we don't release them out in I guess the DNR even has a little warning about it, but they're really effective, and it's done very quickly in a corralled environment where it's like year-round. So on our house, it's like a Rubbermaid tote, but that is a different class that I've also taught, so.
Yeah,
you
I
still
mean,
have your worms?
you can put them in the basement, and it doesn't take up a lot. You got like 2 totes. It doesn't take up a big area, but that's a good way to get rid of your waste, your banana peels and that
Yeah,
type
your
of stuff.
kitchen scraps. And at one time when I had that job with the district, I actually had 15 different classrooms doing that. They babysat my worms throughout the whole class, through the whole school year. And then the funny part was I had all those bins in my house over the summer. It was like stacked up in my son's bedroom, but they got them all back in the next fall. They all went to another classroom.
I have one question, okay?
Yeah.
So why would my thousands of worms all float up to the top and die? I must have overfed it, huh?
There could be a couple of reasons. So it could be that it was either too hot or too cold where they were, or you were feeding something they were trying to get away from. So I sometimes I go to people's houses, or I ask about 100 questions, and then we get to the bottom of it. One time somebody put their worm bin on the dryer downstairs in the basement, but every time they ran the dryer, it was like earthquake for these poor worms, so they climbed out and died. They chose certain death instead of an earthquake for 45 minutes. And it was too hot for them. So, troubleshooting, sometimes we can get to the bottom of why they would.
So Laura, great presentation. But what I'm going to do is follow up by giving all my council member friends some homework to do. And the homework I'm going to have you do is what our committee has been working on for several months already. We've been investigating sources, calling people, visiting people in the area, and by the area I'm talking about kind of the eastern part of the state, the southeastern part of the state, because there are things going on like you mentioned, to get information on how composting can be dealt with in a community where an organization like ours can partner with the city and start getting residents, composting in their backyards and see what happens as we move forward. And one of the things I'm gonna give you for homework is I'm gonna email you these because they have a lot of links that have videos and pictures that you talked about that are pretty exciting to watch. And so one of them is gonna be, I call it investigation sources. And we have 6 of them. And I think you'll be surprised at some of the things going on and how it goes on as far as composting. And then the second document I'm gonna send you, we took a look at each of those and we took notes, made comments, and I'm gonna share those with you also, the main points for each of those sources. So you can see what questions we had. And one of the neat things about searches now on the internet, AI is connected with all searches.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanna know about composting, there's all kinds of stuff out there with beautiful films and pictures and you'll understand what it's all about. So I'm gonna share that with you, and your homework is to look at that for a couple of weeks, see what it's all about, and then I'm gonna ask the council if we could have another committee of the whole where we have some ideas on a partnership that might work. And we wanna share that with you and discuss it and talk about it. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time and having a condensed
Yeah.
presentation. That's nice. We appreciate respecting our time as well. At this point in time, we will, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn so we can have a short break before our 7 o'clock council session. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say